All right, as promised, I can sit here all day and night seeing the sun since 1993 and try to explain away what's going on, but I'm not nearly as smart as Bobby Marks is. The front office insider for the NBA with ESPN for a couple of minutes. Bobby can break this stuff down because when I say to fans second apron, they're like, what? Kitchen? Kitchen apron? No, this is not fantasy basketball where if you just trade KD and get 10 picks back, everything is solved. So wanted to have Bobby on for a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining us. How do you fix this? Okay, I'm just going to throw it up there. How do you fix this, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you basically have one or two options. You can go the easy option, which would probably be firing your head coach, which would be Frank Vogel, and going out and searching for the next head coach. So it would be the second time in 2 years, thinking that coach could fix what you have. Or you do an about face with the current roster and you look at trade suitors, whether it be Kevin Durant or Devin Booker. I don't think the Bradley Beal contract is movable. He's got $160 million left, still has that no trade clause, which is a killer. But when you go through the tea leaves, it's hard, especially when you're a new owner and you're a billionaire owner, to admit mistakes as far as how you've constructed the roster. So that's kind of your options. You mentioned the second apron and where Phoenix is financially. Largest payroll in NBA history entering the offseason. These new apron restrictions that come with this new collective bargaining started a couple of weeks ago, where Phoenix doesn't have the ability to send out Yusuf Nurkic and Nasir Little's contracts. You can't aggregate contracts. You can't go out and take back more money in a trade. We saw that in the Beal trade with Chris Paul. They were able to take back more money. That is not allowed under these new rules. You're not allowed to send cash out in a trade. So Phoenix is limited as far as where they are. I think where you're going to see is, and Phoenix fans are going to be like, oh my God, we just paid $55 million in additional luxury tax penalties. I think you'll probably see them try to bring back Royce O'Neal, which comes at a significant penalty. And that's the big question I had is ownership willing to kind of continually doubling down on this current roster? And unless you're going to make a coaching change, that is really kind of the option that you do have.
Okay, so let's go through the big three. Well, you mentioned Beal, and I guess I have to go back to last year when this deal was coming down because they knew the second apron was coming. Management did. So they just said, you know what, we're going to go all in and we're going to figure this out. That's how it feels and looks. That this was really reckless. Bobby, I don't know how else to put it with Bradley Beal's contract.
So here's a good way to look at it. And you could say this with Milwaukee too, and even the Clippers, teams that were facing this financial crunch coming this offseason, where the league basically said, we're going to give you a year to get your finances in order before these harsh restrictions are going to. You have one or two choices. You can do that, or I always say it's like going to the buffet, right? If the buffet closes at midnight and you get there at 11:50, you're going to try to eat as much food as and you're probably going to get a stomach ache. And that's what Phoenix did. Was they knew that these new apron rules were going to start on April 15th. They said, all right, we've got 8 months to go out and aggregate contracts, to go out and take back more money, to go out and use our trade exceptions here, because that Bradley Beal trade, if we're talking right now, if this was a last offseason and the rules were in place, that Bradley Beal trade doesn't happen. But because they had that 8-month window to go out and do it, they went out and took back that big contract. And I understood the logic of it. I understood why, because Chris Paul was going to be, you're probably going to waive him because of that partially guaranteed contract. Can you flip him for something else? I get that part of it. The part that I do not get is why the no trade clause was not amended in the deal, because that could have been removed. And now you would have had a little bit more flexibility to maybe go out and try to move that contract. But I dealt with it in Brooklyn when we traded for Kevin Garnett. The no trade comes with you. It's like the never ending gift. And I think that makes it a more challenge. But yeah, I mean, it was basically sink or swim, right? Like they knew what was the consequences were going to be. And now you have to kind of live with it.
If you're talking about bad contracts,
it's the worst one. It's the worst one in NBA. And it's the most, and it's really nothing to do with Bradley Beal is a good player. Like
Sure.
Bradley, but he's not a $50 million plus contract. It's the worst contract in the NBA right now. That's where it's at.
Okay, Devin Booker. Devin
Yeah.
Booker, do you get out from under Devin Booker? No player starts and finishes with the same team in pro sports usually. What do you make of it? Devin Booker's name.
Yeah, unless someone's going to come in and offer the house. He's got, year one of this Supermax is starting this offseason, 4 for 221. He's still a heck of a player. I mean, he really is. I mean, I think, there's no reason why you need to look at, if you're going to do that, then you're stuck with Beal. I wouldn't move off. I wouldn't move off Devin Booker. I think he's still good of a player. I think he's still young enough. I think the value of the contract is not, it's not going to be a dead end contract when we get to years 3 and 4.
Flip side of it, from his view, and you've been in this spot, a player looks around and says, you know what, I've done everything. And we've seen it out here in Phoenix. I've given everything. I'm still not viewed as an all-star. I'm not in LA. I'm not in New York. I get to the all-star game, but I'm never, and I've got a chip on my shoulder about that, because he does. Do players' times run out in a certain place, no matter how good they are? Dame Lillard would be a name.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to. I mean, especially where they were and kind of where they are right now. When you
Right.
look at going back to 21, losing to Milwaukee in the finals, the following year having the best record in the NBA and losing to Dallas in a disheartening way. And that's the beauty and the beast of the playoffs, right? Like the playoffs sometimes dictate how, that knee-jerk reaction as far as what direction you want to go. You bring back the same roster after you lose to Dallas, and then you get to the trade deadline and you trade for Durant. Then you fire Monty. Then you go out and get Beal, and then you trade eight, and it kind of snowballs into all these different moves here. I don't think Devin Booker is there right yet as far as saying, you know what, I've had it. I mean, I did my best. I think you have to see where this roster goes going into next year. Is there a coaching change? Do some of the parts move? Do they do a better job with maybe their bench? But certainly a year from now, as we call it, transfer portal, right? It's the NBA transfer portal. Guys, free agency is really for those, the rotational guys. The transfer portal with the NBA is guys extend, and then eventually there'll become a time where you ask out of your contract.
That makes sense. Bobby Marks with us for a couple of minutes before I get you out of here. Kevin Durant seems to be, in our conversation, seems to be the most likely, if they're going to move off of players in this roster, the only way out, the get out of jail card.
I would keep an eye on July 8th. He's eligible to sign a 1-year extension for $58 million. He's got 2 years left at a total of 105. Would Phoenix put that 1-year extension on the table? Could still be traded even if he did sign sign that deal here. They're certainly going to, as I call it, the Sharks are going to be, circling the Phoenix Suns boat. When you look at, there'll be teams like that will miss out in free agency. There'll be teams like Philadelphia that could miss out here. Does Philadelphia come to them, Phoenix, say, hey, we'll give you whatever you want, draft picks? But what does draft picks do for Phoenix? What is draft picks when you have Booker and Beal still on your roster here? I think Kevin Durant is the odd man out if Kevin Durant wants to be the odd man out. But that follows a trend of leaving Golden State, going through with everything in Brooklyn, and now going through something with certainly in Phoenix here.
The coaching situation, it feels and sounds, tomorrow there'll be a press conference as you and I are sitting here talking, that this is the likely outcome is Frank Vogel's not here as head coach. As you're sitting there, is it his fault?
It usually never is, but I've been there. I sat in a Nets conference room in 2013. We had hired, PJ Carlissimo was our interim coach. PJ went like 39-15 during the regular season, and we lost to Chicago in a disheartening way in the first round. And usually you say, well, it's not the players we put together, right? It's got to be, if we can change the coach, that coach can take us to the next level. And we made a coaching change literally the next day after we had lost to Chicago here. That's the only way that you can kind of, there's no salary cap when it comes to your coaching staff. There's no trade rules. There's no, they're a liability for better or for worse. I think ownership had a full year and a front seat to evaluate as far as what went wrong, what what could get better at. I think the big question would be, who's the guy then, right? Like who's the next guy out there that would be able to come in here and make a difference? We don't have that name right now.
And they don't have a point guard right now. They don't have a big.
Well, that's the big. Yeah, I mean, listen.
Come on.
The point guard situation is a major issue. I think you saw it front seat. All fourth quarter, right? Offensive efficiency, fourth quarter, mess down the stretch in the Minnesota game. You got to prioritize going out and getting a point guard. Is that in the draft? I don't know. Average at best draft. Is it in free agency? Bargain shopping? What can you turn maybe one of these contracts into? But that is certainly a priority for them.
If you could sum up, I'll let you off this. If you could sum up a few words on the Suns and their state, what would you say?
I wrote last year and this was after they lost to Denver, and I think after Monty had gotten fired, that Phoenix is no closer to winning a championship. That was a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably double down on that right now, as far as saying the same thing, considering where Minnesota is, where Denver is, where Oklahoma City is, some of these teams that are up and coming. I think you've seen how they build their roster here, certainly with the limitations that Phoenix has going into the offseason.
I appreciate your time and insight. Great stuff. And of course, people can find Bobby's content on ESPN.com. He does a great job. Thank you, Bobby.
I appreciate it. Thank you.